sorts of shit, and then he's got some broken headset that he's never looked after.
Right, I'm back.
All right, mate.
Yeah, I'm on a 10-year-old MacBook Air. So not even a MacBook, and I'm using a £19 Advent conference call headset.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, can you hear us?
Yeah. Is that any better?
A bit.
A bit.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I'm using the exact same headset as I was using the other night, and you
What?
said I was fine the other night.
Yeah, you were fine the other night. I don't know what's wrong. Like, you sound like you're really muffled, like far away, like distant. In comparison to Pickers, you sound really distant. I don't know.
Maybe that's just my distant personality. I honestly don't know what's happening. We're just gonna have to carry on as.
Yeah, carry on. So, sorry. So I'll leave you to pose the question.
Are you just going to point out that like my intro was shit? So it's like, oh, Kyle, we can't hear you. We're gonna have to do it again.
I promise you, I'll keep in as much about the intro as possible.
No. I get it. I get it, Elliott. I get it. you can do the intro. It's fine.
Pickers, what do you think about recasting?
Well, for me, it depends what you mean by recasting and how it happens as well. That's a big impact. I mean, because for every horror story recast that there's out there, there's also like ones that made movie history that you couldn't imagine film any different way. Do you get what I mean? Like Tom Selleck getting replaced by Harrison Ford in Indiana Jones, or Michael J. Fox coming into Back to the Future. Could you imagine if that recast didn't happen, how different that film would be?
It'd have a completely different sort of feel to it, I think.
Exactly, and would it have been a classic that, like Back to the Future, for example, is probably one of my favourite films of all time.
But do you think part of that is because... Sorry, go on, Carl.
I'm going to say your point. You're using examples of actors already being recast. They've been recast before anything's even the production's even started. I know that obviously Eric Stoltz had already filmed some bits and they realised it, but Michael J. Fox was always the person they wanted. It was just scheduling things. But obviously with Harrison Ford and Tom Selleck, it's not like you'd had Raiders of the Lost Ark come in with Tom Selleck and then Temple of Doom, where he's being recast as Harrison Ford. I think the sort of recasting we're referring to at the minute is recasting existing roles, existing characters.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, but if you look at James Bond has been recast, a lot of times in its 50-year history.
But I don't include James Bond in this myself.
Is that because the films have different feels depending on the main actor?
Well, it depends on the actor. It depends on who's directing. But James Bond, it never actually stipulates whether or not James Bond's a person or whether it's an alias.
Well, that's only in recent years people have just started thinking that, though. So I just have a point. If you think, from the
classic Bond film,
the 60s.
Yeah,
it's always been basically, when Sean Connery stepped down, and then George Lazenby came on board. That was a massive thing because people are like, well, hold on, what's happening with the character? And to be fair, George Lazenby does character as Bond does actually say this never happened to the other guy. So I suppose you could be right there, but with James Bond, it's always been that nobody really knows what's happening with James Bond. There's theories out there, and it's been going that long. I just don't think people really care.
I think it could be replaced. Like, don't get me wrong, like you couldn't replace him every film, but I think people look forward to it. A bit like Doctor Who. I mean, I know Doctor Who actually explains what happens to their character a little bit better. The fact that he reforms, and that's why it's a different person playing him. But like, people look forward to the new version of Doctor Who coming out. I think people look forward to the new version of James Bond.
Do you think it's more successful if it's a sort of more minor character? Because they recast Dumbledore, I think, after the second film because the actor had died.
And for me, the second Dumbledore, 100 times better. Yeah, Michael Gambon did it 100 times better. So sometimes it does work.
Do you think
Well,
it's
like
more
what's happening with, I was going to say, well, like what's happening with, funny enough, this sort of ties in is Fantastic Beasts, that film franchise. So as much as I do like Johnny Depp, and I think it's completely unfair what's happened to his career with everything that's happened, I do think Mads Mikkelsen coming in to play that role is better, and I think it's a better casting. But just purely down to the fact I didn't agree with the original casting and the way it's Johnny Depp. I preferred.
See, I like Johnny Depp as him, so I can't say. I don't know. I can't say it's better without actually seeing it, or I can't say I prefer it without actually seeing it. For all I know, Matt Mikkelsen could bring his worst performance ever to it.
Oh yeah, I mean it certainly could do, but if there's going to be that sort of basing on Harry, I'm just basing on Hannibal. If he brings that sort of role
energy?
to it, yeah, energy to that role, I think it'll work with it really well. I still would have preferred Colin Farrell to be the villain from the first film and not have Johnny Depp come in, because I think Colin Farrell last couple of years he's got really good. Well, I mean he's always been a decent actor,
He's been knocking out films since '90s.
But in terms of the roles he's doing, he's sort of handpicking him. He's not being a blockbuster star. He's getting to pick his roles, and the roles he is picking are amazing. Like I know the second season of True Detective didn't really go down that well, but I think he still was really good in that. And you've got obviously The Gentleman. I thought it was absolutely incredible, and that one is probably the best bit at it. And then you've got him coming up in Batman as Penguin, which is going to be something different. And then what he did with Fantastic Beasts, what he's doing now is, he's branching out as an actor, and he's handpicking his roles, and I think it works really well. So I thought he would have been a good choice.
Well, yeah, but it kind of goes away from story unless they cast something in his original place. But that's just how it works out, isn't it? Like they had him as a villain in the first one.
Yeah, I mean they could have done it as like, oh, it was a spell where people didn't really see who we were, and then it turns out, oh, I'm actually,
Do you think
it was
it's
just
better
building
to
up to like
draw
a big
attention to it? Address the problems, right? Address the change in the film, or do you think it's better just to carry on and pretend that like nothing's happened?
That's an hard one because I mean, I'm sure you've watched Hannibal series, so the Hannibal Lecter films, and Clarice Starling, she got recast.
It was Jodie Foster in the original.
Yeah, and that didn't really. They didn't make a big deal out of it. They didn't address it in the film or anything like that. But has anybody really noticed, or has anybody really cared? I mean, obviously you notice. It's two separate people, but it hasn't affected the films in any way. They're still really, really good films.
I think what it is because the thing is, before that film, there was actually Brian Cox played Hannibal Lecter in a film just before that.
Yeah.
So Silence of the Lambs wasn't the first film to come out.
I don't know, because like the one with Brian Cox wasn't exactly a massive film, so most audiences wouldn't have saw that before they saw Silence of the Lambs.
No, but he did still play that role, so it's like, in terms of recasting, so the recast for Anthony Hopkins, and then, he did that, an absolute standout performance, and then it carried over. I think obviously they would have wanted Jodie Foster to stay on, and do a second film, but she just chose not to do it.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying, but it didn't really affect the film. You get me?
It isn't it? I don't know. I think Julianne Moore's acting, she were a bit. I don't know. I think Jodie Foster, if she'd have carried over that performance, I think it would have been better. Her as Clarice in that film would have stand out a little bit more than she does, because in that film you just really just sort of watching Hannibal Lecter. But
see, I don't know. I think they both played it so similar. It didn't really make a difference to story or how viewer felt. A bit like Terrence Howard and Don Cheadle in Iron Man. It don't really make a difference. Like they both played it the exact same way. Like one of them didn't bring their own flair to it, so you don't really notice that much of a difference. I couldn't decide which one I liked better, Terrence Howard or Don Cheadle. It's Don Cheadle, isn't it?
Yeah,
All right.
It's hard to say because obviously
Yeah,
Terrence
I
Allen's
couldn't decide
already
which
did
one of
one
them.
film. But the thing is, he didn't. I agree with that. He didn't bring his flair like Don Cheadle did. Like Don Cheadle made that role his own.
See, I don't think he did. I think they both played it very similar. That's what I'm saying. The fact that they both play it very similar means that you don't really have to address it. I think it's when you get two massively different versatile actors that bring their own shit to it. That's when you've got to address it.
I thought he was quite standoffish, to be honest, Terrence Howard. I thought he could have done a better. You know, he could have put more of a flair into it, his performance, than he actually did. Like Don Cheadle sort of put a little bit of swagger into it, but he's got like a natural swagger anyway. From
Well, yeah, but Don Cheadle also gets a lot more airtime.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean. But for me, the wasn't that much difference between them. So that were a recast that for me still doesn't affect me to this day when I'm watching films. But then there has been certain recasts that have risky recasting. I think it's a lot riskier recasting than it is writing them out the story, which is what I don't see why a lot of studios and stuff don't do.
What, write people out stories?
Yeah, why would it not just be a lot easier to write that character out and write in a similar one to take their place?
That's what they did in 2.5 Men, wasn't it? They wrote out Charlie Sheen's character and then brought in a character that was very much the same, and people complained that it was too similar, but it didn't feel the same.
That and some I mean,
yeah,
I mean that I think 2.5 Men is a
You
bit
gotta
of a poor
remember
example because it's just.
I'm going to say it was a sitcom.
Well, no, I'm not. The reason why I'm saying it's a poor example is I just didn't think it was. You know, in terms of the writing of it, they didn't make an effort. I know, obviously, Charlie Sheen died, but I just don't think the writing. It wasn't. They weren't really creative in what they did.
Because it's a sitcom. It's there for half an hour to take someone's attention away. It's not something to delve into. Like, even if you take sitcoms that you do watch properly, something like The Ranch, you know, Netflix, The Ranch, when Rooster died and they brought in what's his face to cover him. I'm blanking on his name.
Yeah, but if let me take Arrested Development. If you took Michael Cera's character out of Arrested Development, you would notice.
Exactly. So you'd have to write him out. Like, you couldn't recast him.
I'll just be 1 minute, fellas.
Or if you did, you'd have to recast him with someone with somebody with similar characteristics and somebody that acted the similar way.
Yeah.
A bit like, for me, Terrence Howard and Don Cheadle do.
She's fine. Yeah.
So do you think a show is more successful when it replaces an actor with the same actor, with a similar style of actor, than when it tries to replace that character or take a different look at a character?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think bringing in a completely different actor just adds to the fact that you've replaced him. If you get me, like, people really, really notice. Like, that character's then changed because that person's then acting different. Whereas if you writ him out, or if you replace him with a similar actor, there's still a continuity to that story, that arc, that show. It's still roughly the same. It's like Dumbledore. Yeah, he got replaced by Michael Gambon, but Michael Gambon played it very similar to the first. Like, if you were a young kid, which we all were when we started watching Harry Potter's, you never even noticed that they replaced Dumbledore. I had memories thinking that they replaced him halfway through a film, which obviously they didn't. But,
sorry, I missed what you said originally just then. Did you, when you're about Dumbledore and recasting? Are you, correct me if I'm wrong, are you saying about if do you bring attention to the recasting? Is that what you're on about?
I mean,
no,
not
attention.
If you have someone who's a very similar style, is that more successful than? Do you think that's more successful more of the time than when you cast somebody who's very different to a role? Because the Dumbledores are very different to one another, but the sort of argument of who plays War Machine, they're very similar actors.
I'll let you continue, and then I'll say my bit after this.
Train of thought.
I think what you think, Kyle, 'cause it sounds like it might be explosive.
It's not really explosive. I mean, the recasting actors and playing it there with some that, yeah, I do agree with you. There's been quite a few examples in TV where people have come in and recast in a minor role. They've just swapped around the characters and done that, and then people have not really noticed the difference. I do think if you bring attention to the recasting, then that causes more issues, to be honest, than anything else. I think if you do it quite subtly, I mean that's my sort of point. I think it's not. Yeah, there's got to be an element that your actor is very similar to it, but I think it also has to be down to the fact that if you bring attention to it, I mean, and it could also be. It all depends really on how big the character is as well, because sort of smaller characters, you can recast them quite a lot, and people just don't care. Like, pick Game of Thrones as an example. With the Mountain, I think he got played by 3 different characters throughout the whole entire series. But it was only when he did something quite big in the show that people actually noticed him as a character and paid attention to who he were. And then when the people had gone back and rewatched it, were like, okay, we realised the Mountain actually has been recast. But at that point, people don't really care about his character.
So what makes you think that? At what point does it become okay to recast a main character? Because I'm thinking of again, James Bond or Batman. A lot of Marvel DC films, you expect that they'll get replaced, and there's sort of that people seem to be okay with that idea. Like, what point do you get where your series is?
That's where I differ, because I find it fascinating that DC Superman, I accept that they're going to recast him. I expect them to recast him. Same with Batman. But if they try to recast Iron Man, for example, and bring in a different Tony Stark, or bring in a different Captain America, that just sounds wrong. Like, I wouldn't ever want them to do that.
I think the problem you've got is with James Bond. You can quite easily think, because James Bond, there isn't really the stories. I mean, at least before Daniel Craig, took over, the stories didn't really intertwine. They were all sort of separate stories in a way. The thing is with, you've got like View to a Kill as a separate story compared to what you'd got with Thunderball. So they're quite enclosed. Like, nobody really complains about the Spider-Man trilogy and the fact that Tobey Maguire was recast as Andrew Garfield, and Andrew Garfield was recast as Tom Holland, because you can see it as those stories are just completely separate. Same with the Batman films, like the Keaton films are meant to be, it's meant to be in the same universe as Val Kilmer and George Clooney, but you don't really think about that because how different the acting style is and the director's vision is. It you just sort of see them as like enclosed stories, whereas the MCU is just a long. Everything's intertwined, everything's connected. Tony Stark has been, mentioned in other films while not appearing in, so that is Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. So it'd be a massive thing for him to come in and somebody recast and play that role. You'd have to do this whole multiverse type thing, whether it work or not. I honestly don't know.
But you've got that now with DC.
Yeah.
So DC now, they've been building up this Justice League. We kind of hit a roadblock with it.
Well, DC have already gone in there.
I'm gonna say
first with a multiverse, and they've already said that basically the entire sort of everything in regards to DC, not just DC films, but DC TV shows, even the crap ones like Birds of Prey, they're all in that universe. The whole DC sort of live action is all intertwined, but it's just a multiverse type thing. So
which is fine for us, but if you think it on a general kind of viewer scale, are they really going to know that DC have announced that? I mean, to be fair, I didn't even know that DC has announced that every single TV show, every single film that they've ever made is all canon.
I can't believe that Kyle said Bird of Prey's bad, but leaves Arrow. That's one of the good ones, isn't
it? Have you ever watched Arrow? I mean,
I have watched Arrow.
Don't get me wrong, there are some shit episodes and there's some shit seasons, but there are
every time
seasons that do stand.
I'm going to say I managed to watch it for maybe a season. After that, it was shit.
There are worse DC programs out there. There are also worse Marvel programs. So I'm not just saying it. I'm just picking that as an example. As for me, that is one of the worst DC ones. But don't get me wrong. I mean, Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is up there as one of the worst comic book.
But
TV
back to Elliott's original point, like what makes it does?
But what makes a
I
character
can't-
replaceable? What makes it?
Yeah, like what makes something go unnoticed, or what makes something acceptable, and what's something not? Like Batman Begins. The main love interest got replaced between Batman Begins and Dark Knights.
I think it's
Did anybody care? Did anybody notice what the one uproar?
Well,
I think you pretty much just said it right there. I think it's to do with how much people care.
so can I ask you both a question? So if you're looking at the general audience, another again, in the same way that you talk about the DC extended universe, when they replaced Spider-Man's love interest from Mary Jane to Gwen Stacy, do you think people cared? Do you think people noticed, the general audiences? I mean, most comic book fans probably didn't care, but do you think the general audience was confused?
It's really hard to say, Elliott, because we're not just comic book fans, we're like nerd comic book fans. So it's like, obviously, we didn't. I mean, I can say I didn't care because I saw it as it's a separate story. You know, are you referring to Spider-Man 3 or about Amazing Spider-Man?
I'm referring to Amazing Spider-Man. What I'm trying to say is, if you replace
I
not
didn't
even
care either
the
way.
character, it's not even just replacing the character or the actor. It's replacing, sorry, not replacing the actor or actor with the same actor or a different actor. It's changing the love interest in a story that most people recognise as, it's Spider-Man and Mary Jane. And my question is, when you were talking about DC, you were like, do people know? Do people care? And my question is, if people didn't care about Mary Jane or Gwen Stacy, do you think they actually care whether or not the multiverse exists? Do you think people just accept it?
Probably, yeah. Because I don't think they care. They want to just go because it's like they're being told it's it's a good film. They like the DC films. They like Batman as a character, or they like Spider-Man as a character. I think there aren't many people that will say, oh, you know what, I love Mary Jane. I want to see Mary Jane in a solo film. I just don't think people care. They're watching it for that particular character. I think that's one of the reasons why they've been struggling to get Incredible Hulk made into a film, just purely based on the fact that they're watching the Hulk films not so much for Bruce Banner. I mean, yeah, he's a big part of it, but they're watching it for the Hulk. But you can't have the Hulk on a film for 90 minutes. Oh, well, maybe you can, I don't know. But they've not. That's why they've not made one. So I just don't think they care as much as a character to worry about little recastings like that. And even big recastings. It's done in the right way. I mean, we'll have to wait and see because, if they decide to recast Tony Stark, how much sort of uproar that will cause, because you will have regular watchers and viewers that will care about that.
I think you can replace Tony Stark with a character with different morals, with a different background, and it'd be a different story. I don't know if Tony Stark himself is.
Can you though? Can you though?
Yes.
Because people will see Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, but I think Robert Downey Jr. took the role as far as it possibly could go with his version of Iron Man. It'll be a lot of people's definitive Iron Man, but I don't think it's. I'm not opposed to somebody else taking over the mantle of Iron Man on the basis that you could do a different story. It's like a bit like Miles Morales taking us on a Spider-Man. You get a different story and you get a different viewpoint and you get different.
I'm going to say maybe that's the whole idea behind the Marvel What If. If they can get that out to enough people, the what if and changing certain characteristics and changing a main character's storyline, then maybe people will be more open to stuff like Robert Downey Jr. being recast in future or things like that. So maybe that's the old idea. I mean, sounds like a good plan to make that come out now in preparation for 5, 6, 10 years down the line, because they're introducing the multiverse kind of aspect. So eventually, I mean, we could end up with a new Iron Man.
You mentioned how you said about the time scale involved with that as well. How you said 5 to 10 years. Or, do you not think time has a big sort of effect in terms of recasting? Because, I know obviously we've had a lot of recastings in recent years, but if you look at the sort of the time between, for example, Batman like with Michael Keaton, going into we'd got
I would argue that there's never really been a proper Batman series, and so recasting him every other film has not really been an issue because you kind of accept that when a director takes over, they have their vision of Batman, and then when you get a new Batman film, it's written by a different director and a different writer with a different view of what Batman should be, and so it doesn't matter as much.
Yeah, I'd probably go down that route. Everybody knew that Christopher Nolan was signed on for 3 films. He was doing his series. And when that were done, that were it. It were done. It were going to move on to something else.
Interesting to find out, obviously, how it goes down in 5 years or 5 or 10 years time if they decide to recast Tony Stark, and just how it's going to go down. It will be interesting. I mean, I'm open to see it.
I think Marvel kind of thought about this. I think that's the reason, for me, the big reason why they even want to, because doing a multiverse storyline and getting that out to general populace that's messy. It's an hard thing to come across on a film kind of thing, but it pays off massive rewards. So at minute, if you look at the MCU, I've always thought this is they can only go so far with these characters because actors are going to age. Tom Holland's eventually going to be 40, kind of thing. So they've got to have new ways of doing stuff, and they're eventually going to run out of main characters that people forget about. I mean, I know Marvel does a fantastic job of bringing in characters that people don't really know, like Guardians of the Galaxy, and bringing them into mainstream. But eventually, they're going to bring something in and it's going to fail. That kind of, Eternals might be it, or it might be a different kind of group that they're bringing in, or it might be a different hero that they think will land and it doesn't. And then they're going to go back to the safety net, the Captain Americas, the Iron Man, the big heroes, and Hulk and all that kind of stuff. And the fact that they're going multiverse means that they can be recast. But again, I think to be able to do it properly without people holding on to the past too much, you're gonna have to have.
I think you have to go into it with the idea that you're going to put rules in place. They're going to be rules. If nothing matters, if you can do anything, I think people will get bored of that. I think if you establish the rules of the multiverse very early on.
Well, that's the whole reason why like James Bond works for me. Yeah, the fact that it has been recasting since like 60s is fine, but like the whole idea that it's a cover that's given to him, it's a name that gives him to him when he gets 00 status. So every 007 is James Bond. That works for me. If they did actually bring that in and Sony came out and said that's it, I'd be happy with that. And I'm thinking they're going to do that with the next one, because the next one for me is looking more likely than ever to be the first ever black or the first ever female James Bond.
Well, they are actually going to do that because they've already said that she will be.
No, it's been put into thing yet, but it's looking more likely than ever that will happen, which means I'm guessing they will address that issue. And if they come out and said that it is an alias that you get when you get 007 status, I'd be able to live with that. That'd be quite good.
I mean, it makes worse. It makes more sense, with the whole spy thing that everybody's going to alias because oh, what's your name? James Bond. Well, I've heard that before.
I'm going to say, it don't make sense in the fact that you keep the same alias for 60 years going.
My name's Bond, James Bond. But then, it does make sense for the alias, and it'd be interesting to see if they do that, and obviously recast. And
I think they will. With the next one looking more likely to be a black or a black female or a female, it'll come out as though it's an alias.
How do you think that will go down though with the in terms of the viewership?
I mean, at some point you have to tell a new story, but from a different angle. You can't keep telling the same stories. Even if some people don't like it, I think it's still.
They've already run out of books, so they're going to have to explore something completely original. In this day and age,
do you think it'll go down well?
I think it will.
I think it'll be mixed, but I think it'll be more positive than negative.
Okay. I mean, I just don't.
Do you disagree, Carl? Do you think it'll be a bad thing? Do you think?
I'm just using a recent example last couple of years, which is Doctor Who.
Yeah, but Doctor Who has had bad writing for a very long time, and I would say that the major failing of that show is again telling the same stories with the same villains.
With
Again and
Doctor
again.
Who, every season, at least 2 episodes going to Victorian London.
Yeah, and every Doctor Who going, this is the dark and gritty Doctor Who. This is they're taking off the mask and they're now really a villain. Every Doctor Who since was it Christopher? Who was the first one in the 2000s?
Oh shit! Yeah,
Brilliant.
Christopher.
Chris Eccleston in
Christopher
2005.
That's the
Eccleston. Everyone since him have been basically the same character. They've been all happy and cheery, and then under the surface,
Well,
they're
I
dark
don't
and
know.
gritty, and it's all the same character.
I think Chris Tarrant took it in his own direction
I
a
don't
bit.
think
He
Chris
stands
Tarrant-
out for me. Not Chris Tarrant.
Who wants to be a millionaire?
Yeah,
But
that
I mean, that would
because
be a
I were on
different
about
angle.
Who Wants to Be a Millionaire earlier. We were on about Jeremy Clarkson taking over. I'm blanking on his name now.
David Tennant.
Chris.
Eccleston. We've just said it like literally.
David Tennant, that were it.
Yeah,
David
Okay.
Tennant.
Some people like David Tennant. I like David Tennant. I wouldn't say I like Doctor Who.
So, yeah, same here. Doctor Who's not a massive thing for me. I watch it probably Christmas Day, that's about it. But David Tennant does seem to be a standout of a past couple Doctor Who's with Matt Smith and everybody else. He seems to be the stand-up one.
So we're just putting it down to. We're just putting it down to that the viewership sort of dropped from like an average of 7.5% straight down to about 5%.
I
as soon as she took
don't
over.
think it's easy to say, oh, Jodie Whittaker was the reason it went downhill, because the stories were going downhill. I didn't watch
Could just as easily,
Capaldi's version
blame
of
bad
Doctor Who
writing.
because it was really bad. You know.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm just using it as an example. That's all. I'm just putting it out there.
He feels
I-
like
I-
he sounds like he wants to say something, but he's scared of the backlash.
He
That
does.
might.
I don't think it's going to go down well. In personal opinion, I just don't think it's going to go down well. The whole change in Bond, I know obviously Bond's
think-
been, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I think they'll try it, and then they'll go back to something else for James Bond a few years down. I mean, I've got a different vision of how James Bond needs to go anyway. The whole reason.
Well, I think James Bond
And
needs to
I've
go
said-
back to being like a 1960s type film where the gadgets are really like cool and futuristic for the time, rather than
Completely
it all
agree.
being about
Completely
hacking and stuff
agree.
like that. I completely agree with that. I don't think you're wrong, but I think to get there, you need to start telling new stories, and this is just one of the avenues of starting to tell new stories with starting with the character, and then you start with the location and the time. But yeah, 1960s Bond, I think, is the right way to go with it.
I'd be happy to see go back to the 60s, just like what they did with Man from Uncle. I know obviously it didn't really go down as well as everybody would expect, but doing a 60s feel film it's still easy to reproduce and make it with that 60s or 70s feel. But I do think Bond needs his main sort of home is in the Cold War sort of era.
Yeah.
And I think that'd be the way to go with it. It'd be interesting, obviously, if they do recast it as a woman, and see where it goes in terms of the films. I do think they're going to lose some viewership, though, just in my opinion.
I think there'll be a
I'm just
fringe
basing-
that
I'm
says they don't like that.
It is going to get some backlash. It'd be interesting to see where it goes. I'm just saying this now.
Again,
I
it
think
depends
they'll
how
go
they
back
handle
to-
it. They can quite easily replace him with a woman and not feel like they have to address it. It's when people feel like they're getting lectured to, a bit like the Marvel where all the women came in and they did the big pose. And
As opposed to sort of The Boys 2, which did a very similar thing, but more
Yeah.
effective and less.
See, it worked
So-
with the boys how they did it because they didn't, it wasn't.
they didn't lecture to you. You didn't
Yeah.
you didn't felt like you were being told off or getting told that, like you were getting it wasn't like a leftist thing coming at
It
you
did.
saying that.
It really did.
It-
When we were in that cinema, I remember 10 and I was just like, okay.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about the
This is
boys, not Marvel.
No, but what I'm trying
Marvel
to say is,
really-
when you watch it, when I was watching Endgame, it was just like, oh yeah. This is a thing. This is a thing. You need to know about this.
Yeah, I felt uncomfortable.
I think it
Whereas-
was important for Marvel to show that they were taking an interest. I think it's hard because Marvel, Disney, sometimes you just feel like they're just doing things because they think that other people want them to do it rather than they actually see the benefit of doing it.
They didn't need to
Yeah,
do
but
it like that though.
there's a-
because you
Oh no, they
can't-
didn't
way
need to
to
do it
do
like
it
that,
in-
but they needed to
you
show
can have-
something, and it was the easiest way I think for them to show that they were doing something.
Yeah,
It wasn't
but
the right, the
easiest
best
way
way
is
of
not
doing
always
it.
the best way.
Yeah, no,
It's
that's
not.
completely right.
It really wasn't the best way to do it.
No,
It
it
really did feel like I was sat there in cinema getting lectured to. I felt uncomfortable. I felt like I'd personally done something wrong just because I were a man sat there. And that's the whole reason why I still, to this day, haven't watched the new Charlie's Angels film. Because it's the old...
Not the bad reviews.
No, well, the bad reviews did have something to do with it, but I've watched plenty of films that have had bad reviews. I just refuse to watch to watch a film that I know that I'm going to feel like I'm getting lectured to for next hour and a half, 2 hours.
Wasn't like that when you saw the first two Charlie's Angels, and this
No,
is a
it
film where you've
wasn't.
got 3 women leading that film, and
Exactly.
the whole point of it is it not being obvious, and it's like you're watching that film. At not one point when you're watching the original Charlie's Angels films, you're thinking, "Oh yeah, I'm watching 3 women, female-led films. There's no male leads in this. No, you don't see it like that. You just see it as a film, and they're acting. It doesn't have to be obvious, for it to come across, which is what it did. I mean, just like Avengers Endgame, another bit in the film that happened. When Captain Marvel turned up, they were getting shot to shit by that ship. Nobody could do out to stop it, but then Captain Marvel came up and destroyed it. That's all you need, something like that. It make it obvious. Oh yeah, she's got help, and then all the women turn up. Well, none of the other male heroes are there. It's like, why can't they just everybody to be together? Why
Because
it just has to be like?
it's the same thing that I see when it comes to race or gender or out like that. They want equality, and they want to be treated as equal or in a shared space, that kind of thing. Because segregation's something that I thought we were all fighting against. But then Marvel do exactly the same. Instead of including male heroes and them all standing together and female heroes being just as powerful, no. They segregate all women, they put them in a line, and they make them do their own little thing and give them a shout out. That's segregation. It's just such a... I think everybody's fed up with it by now.
So getting back to the original point on, I can't remember what the original point on replacing characters was.
Is it? Is it?
I think that were detour down the James Bond route, wasn't it?
So replacing Cara Dune's character for what's it called? Defenders?
Mandalorian.
No, but
it's the Mandalorian spin-off,
doing.
isn't it?
Rangers of the New Republic.
Rangers of the New
That's the
Republic.
one.
You think that will work, but replacing her in the Mandalorian, how does that work? If you think that,
Well, just to let you know, they're thinking about actually. The rumor is that they're not replacing her as a character. They're going to replace her with a new character. That's the way.
That seems like the smartest way to go because the TV series aren't aired yet. They can just replace her as a character, and the way that the Mandalorians formatted and how it works, we going from one place to another every different episode, kind of thing, and hardly tying in together at all.
I still think that Toad woman's going to replace her. I think we're going to see more of her.
Get rid of her. But for me, it's whether or not she should have been replaced. That's the bit that I have issue with. I don't think the series will suffer for it. I think they'll probably write in a similar character to what she were going to be anyway.
You don't think she should have been fired? Is that what you're saying, or is it you don't think that she should have been? Her character should have been replaced.
It was interesting, obviously, what she was doing. I mean, it's
she was like goading. She did get plenty of warnings.
There's been a couple of things that have come out where apparently that just before she got fired, she was arguing for a pay increase. Now, that was announced after she'd been fired, but obviously just before she got fired, she mentioned quite a few comments in regards to, basically, Trump and supporting him, which is, if you just think it, obviously what happened with James Gunn, he got fired off Guardians of the Galaxy for these comments, which somebody just found, on his Twitter feed, I think maybe, and that was like 4 years before it even, got cast, taken on as a director for Guardians of the Galaxy. So it's many years ago. It's just because somebody found that article or found that post and published it.
Yeah, but I think
He
that
got fired for that.
you can suggest that was possibly Disney overreacting to a situation that they didn't want to see snowball, and that they were protecting their brand rather than.
But the thing is,
it's easy to fire a director.
She'd already posted something a couple of weeks before this. She'd already posted, when the whole thing was happening, around the Capitol building. She was already posting stuff, and then nothing seemed to happen to her. But then she's come out and then said this, so it's hard to really say whether she's just done this as a reaction because she's been trying to get a pay increase, from the studio, or
For me,
she's
no.
just thought is that she, thought, they've let me get away with what I've said earlier. I think, do you not think that actors and actresses need to sort of not say all this?
All you got to look at is the Jon Favreau aspect. So Jon Favreau, as we know, is a massive influence of Star Wars, where I was going down TV front and Disney Plus. And apparently, him and Gina, very good friends. He's had her back all the way through this, which apparently is a big reason why she hadn't been sacked before this. Because he's gone to bat for her on quite a few terms. The latest one that she put, so the one that she's actually been sacked for, is to do with Holocaust, which Jon Favreau is Jewish.
It was quite bad though. Like compared, like I know, saying comparing Trump supporters is like comparing, what did he say? What were it?
Well, yeah, but
like,
she said being a Trump supporter, being a conservative in this day and age is like being a Jewish person in Nazi rule. You're held down and you can't say your views out in public and things like that. But that's when he cut off all his LP said on, he's Jewish, so obviously he wasn't going to back her and and that's when she got sacked. So
it was still pretty bad what she said though. I mean, it's, you don't bring the Holocaust into like a political fucking,
Well, yeah, but again, well, yeah, but so you're saying me that the only reason she got sacked is because Jon Favreau got offended.
No.
If he didn't get offended, she wouldn't have got it sacked again.
I don't know. I don't think that at all. I mean, obviously,
Well,
obviously was defending her, but I think he's just basically just withdrawn his support because obviously he's.
She's said plenty of offensive things before this, and we all know this because she's been goading him for like 2 years now. She's said plenty of offensive things before this, and apparently, from articles I've read, Jon Favreau is the only reason why she's still there. She would have been sacked a long time ago if it weren't for him.
Do you think she just hates Star Wars and she was just so desperate to get off the show?
God knows. Because it seems that way. Really, like, she would just goading him. She would just say one bad thing, right, I can get away with that. I'll say something worse. It would just like, like a kid pushing a parent's buttons. That's basically what it was like.
I think it would just suicide for us to cost him personally, I think that would just when, Disney obviously turn around and we're getting rid of it. We can't be seen, with somebody who's actually compared.
So what I do find quite fascinating is that she's found quite like a new life from this. So have you all heard about the new film that she's been casting and a new film that she's actually producing?
Yeah, the one that she's been taken on board by an agency into a studio. Yeah, but they're all the Republican.
Yeah, so it's somebody called Ben Shapiro. It's his company, and he's a vast like Republican speaker and always out there. And they're producing a new film. We're involved in it, and she's going to produce it with him, and she's going to star in it. So producing and starring, you're probably going to make quite a fair bit of money if that meets even the remote amount of people. So she just seemed to have come off this. I don't know about better, but she'll be close.
I think she's found her niche. I think is probably the right way to
yeah, that kind of thing. Which is really interesting.
If this film takes off, or this studio actually takes off, because it might just crash and burn, and just it's a bit of a gamble. Obviously, what she's done. I mean, it's potentially might pay off for it, might not. Who knows? I'm not really bothered about her character. I'm just going to point this out right now. I don't really care if they recast her or.
You are all people. How can you say that? Like,
I did.
Mandalorian is your baby.
I didn't really find it.
What
I didn't
happens
really
if they
think she-
replaced Mando? Because I mean,
Well,
he
yeah,
wears
but-
a mask all the time, so you could replace him, and you'd never know.
Yeah, but it's Pedro Pascal.
Yeah, but
He's not
his acting's not amazing though. He's under the helmet. He's got a robot voice, and he doesn't really move. So
Right, let's not go back.
I'm sorry. I'm going to say, you could have said 7 out of 10 episodes want him. And I won't be able to tell you any differently.
Pedro Pascal's got a noticeable voice. I'm just saying his acting shows through, basically, to say that he's under a helmet for quite a lot of the episodes.
right. So
and
where does his acting shine through?
Right, let's not. We're going to go off subject here. I'm just pointing out. It will be noticeable if they recast Pedro Pascal because of his distinctive voice. Whereas Gina Carano's character as Cara Dune,
You know,
I
when
don't-
you
I
see
don't-
a face, you see a body, you see her own voice that's not distorted.
Yeah, but she didn't. In terms of the acting,
You'll not notice her being recast.
she didn't really. In terms of her acting, it wasn't great. Let's be honest. You know,
Well, she's not an actor. She's an MMA fighter.
and that's why. Okay, so that's why I'm not bothered. Her acting's not that great. So if they recast, I don't really care about her character. I'd care more if they
Right.
recast Carl Weathers' character. Well,
Yeah, but why?
I mean,
because it's
it's-
Carl Weathers.
I would say that
Carl
the best
Weathers is a
actor-
better actor, or is it because he's been in it longer?
No, because it's Carl Weathers a better actor.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I think Bill Burr is probably one of the best actors on The Mandalorian, and he's like on 2 episodes and he's a comedian. So
Yeah, and that's a good example. If they recast Bill Burr's character as Mayfield, I'd be like, okay, what's
Yeah,
happening?
but that's not saying a great lot for the rest of Mandalorian cast, is it?
No,
So
there are
that's
obviously
like
there's
Pascal.
Comedian is their best actor.
Tamora Morrison as Boba Fett. I'd get annoyed about that. I'd get annoyed about.
I couldn't
Moff
have cared
Gideon
less
being
if he
recast.
got replaced. I wouldn't care less if we never saw him again.
Yeah, I'd join Elliott on that front.
So
Do you think they'll
after
ever,
all
do you
that,
think
See
they'll ever
Kyle.
replace Luke Skywalker? Do you think it'll ever not have to be a plastic face with Mark Hamill doing the voice later in post?
That's a fair point.
well, Sebastian Stan, the fans have been wanting Sebastian Stan to do it for ages. I wouldn't have minded Sebastian Stan coming in as Luke, to be honest.
Well, yeah, but Luke's obviously been up. So I think Star Wars Episode 6, 7, and 8.
Sorry, you mean 4, 5, and so what are you talking about?
4, 5, and 6. Yeah, that's what I'm on about.
Right,
4, 5,
sorry.
right. So let me start again. Right. So Mark Hamill in 4, 5, and 6. That were normal Mark Hamill, young. So if they were going to replace him with Sebastian Stan can't be far off what Mark Hamill was when he was doing his first Star Wars film. So how would that work? How would that make sense for you? Why would that be all right, but replacing him with somebody else wouldn't? That's what I don't understand when it comes to replacing actors. I really don't understand why someone's all right and why someone's not, and why someone's good and why someone's bad.
Because Sebastian Stan looks like Mark Hamill when he was younger, so
A little
you
bit.
could quite easily sort of fit him in that role.
So what you
And
want
him
is a
playing
Robert Downey
Luke
Jr.
Skywalker.
lookalike contest to see who takes over as Tony Stark.
Well, with Robert Downey Jr. Oh no, maybe. The thing is, we obviously yeah, Robert Downey Jr. You know, obviously, you know, he made that film his own.
Yeah, but you could
But-
say the same about Mark Hamill as Luke. Luke, like Mark Hamill is the definitive Luke, so why is it that you can replace him? But when you go Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, you have a big pause over whether or not somebody else should be playing him.
As long as it's the right actor doing it, then yeah, and that's where Sebastian Stan would be the right role. And I'm not against. I never said I were against Robert Downey Jr. It'll be a big thing, and if they do it right, they do it right. I'm not against it. You know, that's the way it's going to have to happen in 5-10 years. I agree with Pickers. You know, Marvel must be thinking about it now. what they're going to do in regards to recasting these characters like Captain America or Iron Man. There's got to be a plan in place, and they've got to test it. I'm not against it. You just need to find the right role to pick it. As long as recasting's done in the right way, in terms of, because obviously you can have somebody coming in and recasting, playing the role, again, and it just be shit. That's why people, going back to Silence of the Lambs, people, they care or they pay more attention to Jodie Foster's performance as Clarice compared to Julianne Moore.
No, they didn't though. That's the thing. Like Julianne Moore and they got away with it. It's because both of them were really good actors. But
I would say
I can't say why they got away with it. This is what I wanted to get at. Is
I think it's because
for you,
in the books, the next film after Silence of the Lambs takes place about 5 years later, where they're in Italy. So I think that even in the books they write that there's a lot of time. So if a character doesn't look the same, I think it's not as
that
bad.
kind of works for it. But going back to like what Kyle said, then if it's done right, I'm not bothered. What means that it's done right? I can't put my finger on it. I can't find a definitive thing where I can put down and say, right, that means recasting is done right. If they do it this way, they've done it right. How do you do recasting right?
I think it's a number of different things, to be honest. I think what it's got to be is obviously the actors got to be good for a start. Obviously that you can't. That's got to be a noticeable difference because people be comparing. That's what people will be doing, comparing every different element. They're comparing the film, the acting style, the changing the director. That's what people will be doing, and that's where that noticeable difference is.
Is that why you think that in Solo people had a problem with the main character in that? They said that he wasn't as charismatic as Harrison Ford. I can't remember who plays Solo in that film.
I don't think anybody can.
Even I can't remember. I'm quite good with names. Don't get me wrong. You're comparing it to Harrison Ford's portrayal as Solo, and it is iconic. But he didn't do a bad job. It's hard to get that line where he was doing something new with the role, but also he was, essentially like impersonating Harrison Ford. Having a good actor, yeah, and also good story, good director. These are all things that I think makes it for a big thing like that. That has to be the real. With minor characters, I just don't think people care. So that's the way it's got to be done. I think obviously Mandalorian, Disney doing the right thing by not recasting it, but also just changing around the role. I think the reason why they might be doing that could be just down to obviously there's pressure on Gina Carano, but also it's not a hard role just to rewrite around. It's not like the Mandalorian, rewriting that particular role. You could just say, something's happened where she's died. And,
I don't think you would have to rewrite the Mandalorian at all. I think we've covered this already.
I think that'd be the easiest thing if he decided to leave tomorrow. Disney wouldn't even break a sweat. Just said, right, we'll never do another scene where he takes his helmet off. Job done.
All right, I'm just using an example, like as a main character. Okay, so as a main character, where she's a minor character, I don't think people would really care.
For you, so let's just narrow it down. So for you, recasting to be done right, it has to be a good actor, and it has to not to be a major role.
No, that's not what I've said. I've said if you're recasting a major role, it just basically
has to be a good actor.
Yeah, otherwise people are going to constantly be comparing the two different things. And if a film's shit, they're going to be like, well...
Earlier, we were on about Grindelwald, so Fantastic Beasts, and you replaced Colin Farrell with Johnny Depp. Both of them really good actors. Both of them done fantastic films in the past. Why did that not work?
You're missing what I'm saying when it's good actor. I mean, the good actor in what they're doing in regards to that role. I don't think Johnny Depp was right for that particular role.
See, I do. I think he fits that role perfectly. I thought it was really good that Johnny Depp came into it. I'm not looking forward to Miles Beckles with love coming in and taking over.
I think you probably more notice it because it's not a very good film. I mean, I can't see Jude Law as Dumbledore, if I'm honest.
That'll be a good example.
Same, I was going to say, Dumbledore didn't really get, like, That's another thing as well. So you haven't just got recasting; you got people. It's technically recasting because you're recasting a younger version of that actor, if you get me.
Or that character.
Yeah,
Casting
and
for a
if
character
you put the wrong person in there, it completely throws it off. And I think Jude Law probably stands out for me more than Holt.
But Jude Law
Like,
is trying to carry a lot of the characteristics of the second Dumbledore into his role. So it's hard to. He has a lot of the same mannerisms in that film as the older Dumbledore has. It's clearly tried to mirror it.
I didn't
I
really
don't
like.
know.
I didn't really like Jude Law as Dumbledore, to be honest. I just you're comparing the characters, between the films.
Can I say though, Jude Law makes an excellent Lemony Snicket. Sorry, go on. The recast
random.
Lemony Snicket about 3 times. Go on.
Well, no, they didn't. It's him and Patrick Warburton. I think Patrick Warburton did a good version of the role. I quite liked how he was just quite straight with everything he was doing.
Patrick Warburton's amazing no matter what he does.
He is. I
Even the
wouldn't say it was
Tick,
my
which
Lemony
was
Snicket.
absolute dog shit. Patrick Warburton could mean something dog shit, and I'd still come out there being quite happily that I sat there and watched it.
The Tick is a prime example to say like one of these
Exactly
was dog shit, but it was just
it was dog shit, but he was good in it. You know what I mean? It didn't make me feel like I'm wasting my time, or wasting my time as much.
So just to wrap up, what makes a good recasting to you, Pickers?
I don't know. After talking for like
an hour,
over an hour now, I'm
still
no closer to deciding what makes a good recast and what makes a bad recast. I think a lot of it is down to luck. I think it's how much people are attached to that character. I think it's what actor replaces or actress that replaces that character. I think there's a lot of things that go into play on whether or not it's a good, successful or a fail when it comes to a recast.
I think you have to have a good film to start off your role, and I think you have to have a director that's willing to work with you in order to see the perception of the character that actor thinks is the best portrayal of it, is their portrayal of it. I don't think you can say one way or the other what makes a good character, but I think if you look at the Bond films, one thing that works regardless of the recasting is that they've always tried. Every actor has their own definition of what Bond should be, whether it should be more action orientated or it should be more suave. Or
I agree with. Yeah, I mean, playing it safe, but I still think it needs to be. There's multiple elements, right? I think, like I say, for big roles, I think it just needs to be the fact that the thing is, obviously, Harry Potter and Dumbledore, even though Dumbledore, Richard Harris' character, were in it quite a bit in the. Well, was it really in the first 2 films? I need to check the screen time and how much he's got, but Michael Gambon's got a lot more screen time. I know, obviously, he's been in more films than that, but maybe that's why you sort of notice it more, but you don't really notice the sort of the recasting with Dumbledore. Not so much. Very similar, but then they also bring something new to it. I think Michael Gambon brings some more physicality to the role, which you wouldn't have got with Richard Harris.
I think it's got a much bigger, it's got a much louder, more presence, whereas I think the original actors got a more wispy, otherworldly character.
I think Richard Harris would have played the role a lot differently if he would have been alive, to finish the rest of the series. He would have played it a lot differently to Michael Gambon, but it's hard to say that really, because you tend to. I respect Richard Harris's sort of acting, so you don't really want to sort of.
You also don't know because the films themselves changed as well.
Yeah, that's
the older Harry got, the more, and same with Dumbledore as well. The more urgency seemed to come with it. So, like when you get into 4th and 5th and 6th films and stuff, like Dumbledore seemed to have a lot of urgency behind him, and obviously that's because you knew what was coming, kind of thing. It's just the films themselves changed a lot, which obviously changed how you portray a role. kind of thing, are a character arcs.
But also the films are, you know, they're good. They're good films. Whereas that sort of switch between, you know, what you'd got, you know, we obviously, you know, Jude Law coming in, you know, playing Dumbledore, you know, he played a different sort of role to it, but I don't think, you know, when you compare the Fantastic Film series compared to Harry Potter, you know, it's not, the films aren't as, in terms of the story, aren't as, you know, good as what you'd get with the Harry Potter series.
It's why there's no definitive Fantastic Four.